So, as an industrial designer, he loves seeing design bridge the gap between technology and business to create transformational tools for people to do what they do better. His background in industrial design landed him in Finland, where he ended up working for a digital agency before founding and running the digital agency Pixels Helsinki back in 2017. Since then, he has set up business innovation units and run development teams. He's currently business director of e-commerce and website at Valve Branding. Please give a warm round of applause to our first speaker, Tom Hurd.
All right, does that work? I think so. Can you hear me all right? I think. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I want to say thank you as well to Vladimir and the rest of the team, including all the sponsors and everyone else who's been involved in putting this together. I've seen some of the behind the scenes, let's say, activities from way back when this whole thing was just a thought in someone's head or some people's head to people busily packing goodie bags the last couple of days at the office. So thank you to everyone who's been helping. Round of applause for them again. All right, so today I'm going to talk about WordPress networks. So my first question is, who knows what a WordPress network is? Oh, I thought it'd be at least more of you. Okay. Who knows what Multisite is? Okay, so you're using the wrong name, apparently. Don't shoot me. So who deals here with clients who have either multiple brands or multiple countries or regions that they're having different websites for? All right, so this talk is basically something that you guys should be hopefully useful or interested in, or you're going to be sitting there going, I already know everything. But firstly, who am I, this strange person who's talking in front of you? As has kind of half been introduced, yeah, my background is industrial design. So I come from a systems and design background. I consider myself a problem solver. And recently, what I've been really getting into is how you can use AI in a practical sense. So a bit more than just kind of, okay, I got ChatGPT, cool. Like, how can you actually use it in business cases to make things more efficient? I'm a big fan of don't replace people, but just do all the work they hate to do. I've originally came through, so as you can maybe tell from my accent, though it is a bit messed up these days, I'm from New Zealand originally, but I did my university in Australia. I've also done projects in Uganda while I was doing some work at Aalto University, and Aalto is in fact the way I ended up in Finland. And then I've worked at a few companies before starting Pixels with Vladimir, actually, and Antero, who's somewhere here, and a few others back in 2017. And then through bits and pieces and changes, I've ended up at Valve here in Finland, or just down the road there, rather. So let's start with the basics. What is a WordPress network? So it's a single installation of WordPress that hosts and manages multiple websites from one dashboard. But my take on this is it's probably the most, well, yeah, this is a hot take, let's say, the most powerful, well, one of the most powerful features of WordPress. It's one of the most undervalued and underused and underdeveloped. And I'll come back to that later. But if you're wondering, okay, great, but how do you have more than one website on one install of WordPress? Now get ready for some really dry graphics. This will be really fun for no one. So you have your lovely little server and your database and your drive, as you usually do, and you have WordPress there. And basically, you just have a stack of them, which are then set up. In terms of uploads or your folders for your media, each one is actually separated, even though it's on the same drive. And your database is the same database, but with different tables. So if you're familiar with how tables work, you have maybe, is it like 11 or something like that by default? It'll just make separate tables or sets of those 11 tables for every database. So in that respect, the data is kept separate. In terms of users, it gets quite, I'm not sure if fun's the right word, but you can have users at either a site level or you can have them at a network level. You can also have users as you can, if you can sort of deduce the little different characters, you can have users that are assigned or with the same login are given access to multiple sites. users that are given access to just one site, or then like the little one on the bottom, you can have a super user or a super admin, as it's called, who can basically do everything, burn the world down, et cetera, et cetera. This is really useful for when you're dealing with those situations where you have multiple countries sites or multiple brand sites, and you have someone who needs to kind of have all the power, but then you want to sort of delegate some of the power out as well. Plugins is a little bit of a fun case. So you add them at a network level, so the top level, and they can then be seen and accessed by every single site on the network. You can enforce some plugins at a network level, so that means that every site has to use them. And then you can also choose to not do that, and then you can turn them on or off at a site-by-site level. Again, another one of these fun facts. For those of you who know what a MU plugin is, or a must-use plugin, I don't know if this is actually the right thing or this is just the rumor or whatever, but supposedly this is exactly where they came from. The idea of having a plugin that is forced across all sites, or across multiple sites, or across a site. In terms of themes are a bit weird. Well, not weird, but maybe. You add them at the network level, but then you have to enable them to even show up in a site at a secondary level or at the site level. And then from there, obviously, you just choose the one you want. So if you look at the bottom there, you can see that there's one theme that's not been sort of enabled for use, and then it won't even appear in the options that the other sites have. But there's more, because this is super exciting. There's a whole nother level you can have, which is literally having another level. So you can not just have one network, but you can have a site that then turns into a network, which then has a site, which then turns into a network. And I'll go into some of these cases and why they're actually useful a bit later. So what are the advantages? Saves time. Simple one there. Oh, my screen just went. Oh, no, came back. Wait, have I missed one? No, okay, cool. It allows a lot easier cross-site management of users, as well as themes and plugins. So if you're, especially when you're dealing with a company or an organization where you're doing multiple sites for the same company, and you've got the same sort of people using it, this makes it a lot easier to manage that without having to log in and log out of 20 different sites. It uses a unified stack, so you can have a bit of control, but then there's also flexibility depending on what the needs are. And you really can create a new site in seconds. It's literally just type some information and press create site. That's it. And if you're smart, and there's a few different ways, I won't go into all of them today, but I can also talk to you about them if you're interested. There's a bunch of ways that you can populate the content in minutes as well. So you can really go from having nothing to having a site with a bunch of pages with content ready to kind of then fine tune. And it reduces the hosting costs and hosting complexity, but sort of, I'm going to say it like that. It does and it doesn't, but usually it probably does, especially if you go with a host who kind of actually knows how this is supposed to work. If you're doing it yourself, you can be in for some fun times. That was sarcasm if you hadn't realized. Then there's a few features that are built in that are not actually used. So this may sound a bit weird, but I came to that point about it being underdeveloped. There's some parts of networks where you sort of, I think literally if you go into the code, there's points where people say, this has been done because this feature will be developed. And this piece of this comment is from like 10 years ago. And the feature doesn't exist. So there's bits and pieces that are kind of there, but you can bootstrap onto them. You can hijack them and use them for your own purposes. And basically in terms of when you're going for client benefits, you can have this sort of individual content, but unified branding if you want, or individual content with individual branding or whatever, but it helps with sort of just maintaining everything. And yes, there are disadvantages. It adds technical complexity. It adds a whole nother layer of restrictions. So if you've got people who don't like restrictions or who get funny about things and want to have all the power, then you might have some fun conversations with people. More sites do mean more server power. So the more sites you have in the network, you're of course going to need to have a gruntier server. And I was saying about if you try and set this up yourself, you can be in for some fun times. I mean, a lot of this is already documented, but if you sometimes mess one thing up, it gets stuck in some caching loop and then it doesn't show up. And then if you've been in a caching loop before and things have not gone wrong, you know what I mean. It could be a bit weird. And then there's just differences about the way that you work. So if you're familiar with capabilities in WordPress, you sort of manage options is no longer your highest capability. You've got managed network or networks, I think it is. And there's a bunch of different things that you sort of just have to get used to. And yeah, the documentation's a bit interesting. It could be missing. I think this is the same in WordPress anyway. There's bits that are missing, but when it comes to networks, it's like it's like the Macaulay Culkin. It's been left behind a few times. No one's really, I think that reference may have also just missed a bunch of people, but anyway, my age, And the data and media aren't truly separate. So while I was saying that there's different tables and things like that, if you're actually working with a client where even within a company, it's not appropriate to have someone in some way through a login being able to still access the data from another part of the company or something, then you're not really protecting that. And in the age of the incoming wave of NIS2 and sort of the trickle-down effect that that's going to have on security, that's not really an okay thing to do. So you do have to be careful about how you're using it. But for most presentational websites, things like that, this will be just fine. So is it right for you? This is when the car salesman comes in. So first case is if you've got multiple markets. So by markets, I mean countries, regions, any sort of other geographical area or something like that that you might be dealing with. So again, more dry graphics. So we've got our little company Acme. If it's a Nordic company, let's say, you could have the Danish, Finnish, Norwegian, and Swedish sites, all as their own sites. You can also have multiple tiers. So if you go into a really large enterprise, you won't just have country sites, or you won't need to just organize the sites by country and giving the access just by country. You might need to also give access to regional teams. So you might have a European team, an Asian team, a Pacific team, a North American team, who all are then looking after specific country sites. And I'll come into this and how this plays a little bit later as well. And if you're dealing with multiple brands, you can have whatever, a good old Acme company, you can have there, and you have brand 1, 2, 3, 4. A really good, I don't think they do anymore, but I think at one point, Fiskars Group used to have something like this, but they would have Fiskars Group, and then you have Fiskars Itala, Arabia, and Hakman. For those of you who are Finnish, for those of you who are not, those names meant nothing probably. And then this is the sort of taking it a whole nother level. So you can have multiple brands over multiple markets. So if you've got Acme company and you've got your different country sites, then you can have the different brand sites there under each company that help people manage it. So if a country team is managing the brands of that company, then you can organize it like this. But you can also flip it. So you can also have it that if it's by brand. So in some companies and some organizations, for example, in the Nordics, there'll be someone who looks after the brand for all of the countries in the Nordics. And so that's how you actually would structure this network to give the right permissions. The good thing is you can change parent sites in WordPress. So if the organization changes, you don't have to completely change or just like throw the whole thing away and start again. You can actually do some changing with configurations and move things around. Another one is, we've had this many years ago. We were dealing with a company that was doing lots and lots of these projects that were quick start. So they just needed to be able to spin up websites for these projects with the same branding. It was just, they had a color scheme that they would choose and things like that. So if you're doing that, then that can be really useful. So here you can see you just got your different projects. And the first one is project template. I'll come back to that as well in a second. And really, well, actually, this is a perfect case, probably. University or higher education institution will often have these where you've got the organization, and then you might have, in the case of a university or higher education, you'll have different schools, and then different schools might even have different sites for the departments. And then multiple client sites. Now, this is on one hand, I would say I don't recommend this. On the other hand, I guess most of you know what WordPress.com is. Yes, maybe? Yep. WordPress.com is probably the biggest network in the world. It is a WordPress network. The whole thing is just a massive, giant WordPress network with incredible amounts of optimization done to it. So I wouldn't probably in a agency necessarily do this, but at the same time, WordPress, this is the whole kind of business model that they base things on. So you can have your company and then you can have your different client sites. But where that does come into use is that if you're doing something like headless CMS and the load on the server is not going to be so heavy, you can utilize sites to give your clients the admin, but then not actually have to have a different installation for everyone. Lastly, so those are the use cases that I think are the most sort of common and most easy to kind of get your head around and use. But I also have some handy tips, I hope. So one thing that weirdly, don't ask me why it's done like this, I think it doesn't make sense, but when you use a network, if you have a site that's boo.com and then you have a subsite which is foo.com, foo.com's assets, so all the images, all the CSS, the domain that's being used to serve those will be boo.com, which for SEO purposes and various other things isn't necessarily good. If you're doing a CSP, that's a bit annoying. So you can use hooks to change the asset domain to make it match correctly, which then deals with a lot of those problems. You can build quick start templates. So you can build entire sites that are just a template site that you can then copy the database and then do some fancy find and replace to basically spin up site content quickly. So I talked about that before. You can also use these sites to easily check best practice settings. So if you basically set up a best practice website or start a website database, just like you might have a starter theme and things like that, you can use this to then have that starter for the database, and then you can verify if the client says, this thing doesn't work anymore, and then you can go and look at it and go, oh, okay, it's because someone's changed this. Okay, this is how it should be. Kind of like documentation without documentation. Having global reusable content. This is one we've done a few times. We've got a Redgo who's does tow trucks. We have them as a client, and we've done this big thing where they have localized sites, and we have some of it's global content, some of it's local content, and we're having to push updated global content all the time, and there's this whole big thing behind it. But it's really cool, and it's really effective, and it's really efficient for them. Saves them a bunch of time, and they get really good results because they can have these localized sites that are picking up on localized SEO. Caching. You need to be using, ideally, all the caching you can, because you really want to reduce the server load that might otherwise come just because you're hosting it on one site. It saves costs, it saves energy. It's basically better for pretty much everyone, as long as the front end and the actual site still operates. And especially this is useful for important when you're doing one of these networks where you've got country sites. If you've got a company which is based here, the site's based here, and the New Zealand site, if we take my homeland, is on the other side of the world, you don't want to have a huge latency, a huge delay in loading the site. So you want to cache not just from the server point of view, but at the edge, so as close as you can to the users who are going to be opening it. And you can use site meta to your advantage. So there's lots of meta options within sites, both that have already been made. So I talked about those things that have been made but never actually really fully implemented. So you can, there's a checkbox for public, private, whatever. You can use those to hook in and actually already set up, for example, password protection or just redirects on a private site or whatever you want to do there. Yeah, they have nothing, but yeah, you can do a lot with them there. And yeah, as I already said it before, but you just have to really be careful about the server load because it can be, most of the time it's fine. For presentational sites, it's fine. I would say for e-commerce, you have to start worrying because the e-commerce sites require a lot of server power. They require lots of actions to be actually run on the server live. So they maybe are better on their own, even if every other site in an organization is actually in a network. So you don't have to put everything in there. And lastly, with logins. So I think this may have changed because once upon a time, I think there was a hack that basically if you have lots of top-level domains, so blah.fi, blah.se, blah.whatever, you could kind of trick it into letting you keep logged in the whole time. But now with domains and cookies and the way that those are going, you can no longer do that. So you need to have an ideal way to do this is using an SSO provider, which can then keep you signed in across all sites. I just learned this about a week ago because I always used to do the other trick. So what's the verdict, or what's my verdict? I think that it's a very powerful and underrated feature. it's a really, really good solution for complex needs. I think it's really underused. One thing I think the reasons it's underused is a lot of hosting plans will not let you have a network on a site. Was basically, let's say you're paying 30 euros or something for hosting, the plan that will let you have a network will be 90. So it doesn't make sense from a financial point of view to go to that until you've got 3 sites. But you can start getting benefits already if you've just got 2 sites on a network. It can already provide you benefits there. So I think it's kind of underused partly because of that. And it is more involved, it's more needy, and it's definitely not for everyone. There's a lot of possibilities, and you can really be creative and make really interesting things with networks. Like I've seen some really cool examples over the years of, I wanted to show some, but they don't exist anymore, so I couldn't get them. But there's been, you can really use networks in a really smart way if you think about it and look at how you can apply them to different challenges you might have. And you also need a good server. Otherwise, this is all just a moot point. So that's it. What's your verdict? Do you have questions? I guess we might have questions or no questions.
We do have questions. Thank you very much, Tom. Stay right up here. We have a bunch of questions. And nobody moderating them, but I'll moderate. But I got a question about more of a statement, I think. One person says, if you ask hosting, if you can use multi-site, you'll get a quite interesting answers, and that you kind of touched upon. Yeah. Yes. So probably.
I think there's extra config and people don't like it. Or hosting providers maybe, but like, it's another thing we have to like work out, and it probably does get a lot of interesting support queries. Like I'm in an eternal loop that we'll never get out of. So gotcha. I get that.
Multi-site versus translation with WPML or polylang, etc.
Favorite topic.
All right.
I actually have a whole other topic, a whole other talk about this from about 7 years ago, maybe it was, or maybe 8 years ago, about this. Yes. It depends on whether you're creating a translation or whether you're creating a new set of content. So I talked about the different countries. In Europe, we have lots of cases of this where it's quite easy. If you're doing a page if you've got a company that doesn't have any difference between what it does across countries, apart from you just need to translate the content, maybe some minor changes, then you can easily use like WPML, Polylang, whatever. But if you've got countries where you need to have either the content really has to be different because you have different products, slightly different offering, and then you would want to use multi-site probably. But if you have, for example, Finland, we are a perfect case. Switzerland's a really good case of this, where you need to also still have different languages within the country site. That's when you can have the countries as network sites and then the languages using a plugin. There's you can still use Polylang for this, or at WPML, there's also one, I think it's Multilingual Press, which actually is made specifically for that use case of having a multi-site, which is handling the different countries and things. So yeah, but I have another talk. I think if you search for my name and multilingual, you'll find it. Yeah,
cool. What would you say would be the best practices for setting up the network? Do you use a root site or a network for different purpose than subsites? Helping root site only, for example, helping root site only for configuration.
So when you create the site, to explain what that maybe I think is, if whoever it is, you can tell me if I've misunderstood. When you set up the site, there's the first site you set up, which becomes what they call the main site, or I think this person's saying root site. And then they're asking, do you still use that site, or do you then create different ones? I think it depends on your case. I have situations where we've used all of them because it's usually started with, let's say the .fi, and then they said, we're now going to Sweden. Can we create a Swedish site? Can we create a Norwegian site? Can we make a German site? Other ones where we, like I was talking about the template site, or that case about the global content being pushed to these other sites. In that case, we use the main sites or the root site as the template site, which is not public. and then all the others are. So we just use that to kind of create and edit and then push the updated content. Yep.
All right, cool. I think we still have some times we have a lot of questions, actually. I'm trying to like live moderate and also pick of these which I haven't read already. And but someone asked, like, what specific expertise does it take to set up and maintain a WordPress network compared to a standard multi-site, especially on the infrastructure and operations side?
So infrastructure, you probably need to have, well, yeah, if you're talking about just server infrastructure, it's kind of the same. The only thing you need to know is the differences in the Apache or Nginx rules that you'll have to set up if it has not already been set up for you. At the same time, WordPress has a bunch of information about how to set that up, and I think most of the time it works. I think they even have, like, very clearly when there's a page about how to set it up, which is follow these instructions in this exact order. Do not do anything different, because it does tend to screw up a bit. But in terms of other sort of administration of it, it's pretty much the same. It's just like if you just imagine there's WordPress, and then there's just suddenly magically appears this other level of WordPress above that you just have to learn a little bit. But pretty much everything is in the same standard of how they talk about things, how functions are named, how, like, you still have actions and things like that. You do get limitations where there is a network options page, but it works a bit funny. So it's a bit hard to, I think if from memory, there's not like a network options database table. So saving certain data like you would normally in a site at a site level doesn't really work the same. But then you've got site meta, and they did this wonderful thing where you will get confused, because when you start talking about sites, they talk about blogs and sites. Because I think that was the original hierarchy they had, that you had a network of sites, and then if you went to another level, you started calling them blogs. So you will sometimes see people missing using the same things interchangeably, and sometimes it gets a bit confusing. So yeah, but usually it's the same thing.
Okay, I think I'll pick one more question, and you're going to be around here.
Yeah.
So I think if you didn't get your question asked, then Tom will stick around and just, grab him and ask. Alice asked, what's the best way to clone a subsite to a new subsite in the same network?
Probably using a plugin. I think you can export and import from a single site still, but I think I don't want to go throwing up brand names, but I know at least at Valve we use everyone's favorite WP Migrate, which there was also some drama along, I think, many years ago with. But there are some plugins like that which have specifically set up things that you can just copy or migrate the content from one site in a site to either another site or to another site in a network or wherever. So those options, yeah. There's usually a plugin, I think, is your best bet for that.
Awesome.
Cool.
Hey, give it up for Tom Hurd, everybody.
Thank you.